They towed my truck, so I bought the towing company. Yeah, sounds petty, sounds insane, sounds like something you say after 2 beers and a bad day. But this one? This one was calculated, slow, and very, very personal. So let me back up a second. I own a mid-sized commercial building in a city I'm not going to name. Let's just say it's one of those fast-growing downtown areas where every square foot suddenly thinks it's worth gold. My building isn't flashy, no glass tower, no rooftop bar, just brick, clean lines, solid tenants, accountants, a small law office, a therapist who always smelled like lavender, and behind it, the real prize, 12 parking spaces. Now, if you've ever owned property downtown, you already know, parking is power. Those 12 spots, they weren't just convenience. They were leverage, retention, stability. They were the reason my tenants stayed year after year. And for almost a decade, everything ran smooth. No disputes, no confusion, big metal signs clearly marked. Private parking, tenants only. Violators will be towed. Simple, clean, respected. Until the day the new neighbors showed up. Their names were Derek and Alyssa, fresh money energy, California plates. The kind of couple that walks into a space like they already own the future of it. They bought the building right next to mine. Cash deal, closed fast, didn't even blink at the price. Within a week, there were contractors everywhere, dumpsters, scaffolding, people in branded hoodies talking about creative space and scaling teams. I met Derek the second week. Firm handshake, big grin, expensive watch that somehow wanted you to notice it. He had that tone. You know the one. Friendly, but just slightly above you, like he's already decided how this relationship is going to go. We walked the boundary line together. I pointed it out clear as day. These 12 spots? They belong to my property. Always have. He nodded, quick, almost too quick. Yeah, totally, man. And right there, I should have known. Because people who actually understand something don't rush past it. 3 weeks later, I get a call from one of my tenants, Emily. She's not the type to panic. Very level-headed, runs a bookkeeping firm, the kind of person who triple-checks everything before making a move. But this time, she's furious. Hey, my car's gone. I thought she meant stolen. My stomach dropped. But then she said something that didn't sit right. There's a sticker on the ground, some towing company. I drive down immediately. And there it is, empty spot, a bright orange sticker half peeled off the asphalt like some kind of cheap warning label. Apex Recovery Services. Phone number, $450 release fee. $450 to take a car that was parked exactly where it was supposed to be. So I call the number. Guy picks up, voice like gravel, introduces himself as Tony. I explain the situation, calmly at first. Hey, you towed a vehicle from my property. That shouldn't have happened. He cuts me off. We towed at the owner's request. I pause. I am the owner. Silence. Then he goes, we got a call from Derek. He provided documentation, said those spaces were his. That's when the irritation turns into something else. Not anger yet, something sharper. So I call Derek. Hey, I say, keeping it even, you just had one of my tenants' cars towed. He actually laughs. Not nervous, not defensive, just amused. Oh yeah, we've been using those spots for overflow. Our contractors need somewhere to park. I let that sit for a second. Those aren't your spots. He sighs like I'm the one being difficult. Look, Alyssa checked the layout, and honestly, your signage looks outdated. It's not very clear. Not very clear. 12 metal signs. 8 years. No issues. Your tow company just charged my tenant $450. I say, slower now. Then she can pay it and get her car back. He replies, like we're discussing a parking meter, not someone's property. That's when it clicks. This isn't confusion. This is entitlement, dressed up as ignorance. I tell him straight, those spaces are deeded to my property. You're going to reimburse that fee, and this doesn't happen again. And just like that, the tone flips. No more friendly neighbor. No more handshake energy. Our survey says otherwise. He says, colder now. If you've got a problem, take it up with our attorney. And he hangs up, just like that. So now I'm standing there in my own parking lot, looking at an empty space that used to belong to someone who trusted me to protect it, and realizing this isn't going to be a quick fix. I call my lawyer, Marcus. Guy's been handling property disputes longer than I've owned buildings. Doesn't scare easy, doesn't bluff. I send him everything. Deeds, plats, old surveys, photos of the signage. He calls me back the next morning. They're wrong. He says, no hesitation. Those 12 spaces are yours. No gray area. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't even close. Marcus sends a formal demand letter, reimbursement, cease and desist, the usual. Clean, professional, leaves no room for interpretation. Derek's lawyer responds 3 days later. Boundary ambiguity. Ambiguity. They offer to split the towing cost. Split. The cost of towing a car from my own property. I remember reading that email twice, then laughing, not because it was funny, but because it told me exactly who I was dealing with. This wasn't about misunderstanding lines on a map. This was about testing boundaries, legal, psychological, personal, seeing how much they could take before I pushed back. So we filed suit. Conversion. Trespass. Clean case. But here's the thing about court, it moves slow. And Derek? He knew that. Because while we were waiting, he didn't stop. Not even once. Every time one of my tenants parked in those spaces, boom. Gone. Towed within hours. Like clockwork. Another $450. Then $500. Then one that hit almost $700 with after-hours fees. And every single time, I paid it. Not because I had to, but because my tenants trusted me, and I wasn't about to let them carry the cost of someone else's arrogance. For cars. 5. 6. Each one another reminder that this wasn't just a legal fight anymore. This was a message. And Derek thought he was the one sending it. He was wrong. All right, pause the story for a second, because this is where things get interesting, not just emotionally, but strategically. According to standard procedure in most commercial property disputes, especially in dense urban zones, parking rights are not casual understandings. They're legally defined, documented, and usually tied directly to the deed or a recorded plat map. That means whoever owns those spaces doesn't just kind of own them. They own them in a way that's enforceable in court, with very little wiggle room. Now here's where Derek made his first real mistake. From a legal perspective, calling a towing company and authorizing removal from land you don't own, that can fall under wrongful conversion, basically interfering with someone else's property rights, and in some cases, even opens the door to damages beyond just the towing fees. He wasn't just being aggressive, he was stacking liability. But honestly, the legal side? That's only half the story. This is a psychological trap I've seen before, especially with people who come in fast, spend big, and assume control comes with momentum. Derek wasn't confused. He was anchoring. By acting like the spaces were already his. Confident tone, quick decisions, zero hesitation. He was trying to force a new reality, where I'd either back down or get dragged into a long, exhausting dispute. It's a power move disguised as a misunderstanding. And here's the thing, most people fold right there. Not because they're wrong, but because fighting it feels expensive, slow, and honestly draining. That's the game. And Derek thought I was going to play it his way. He misread me. So yeah, Derek thought this was going to be a waiting game. Drag it out, apply pressure, make it expensive enough that I'd eventually compromise, or just give up. And for a minute there, I'll admit, it almost worked. Not because I doubted the law, Marcus had already made that crystal clear, but because every single day this thing dragged on, my tenants were the ones feeling it. They'd pull in, hesitate, look around like they were doing something wrong, and then I'd get another call. Hey, is it safe to park here? And every time I had to say yes, knowing there was a decent chance their car would be gone by dinner. That kind of thing eats at you. Not just financially. Though yeah, I was bleeding a few grand at this point, but reputationally. Trust is fragile in commercial real estate. Once tenants feel like their space isn't protected, they start looking for exits. Derek wasn't just poking at my parking lot. He was quietly destabilizing my entire building. So I called him again. One more time. Gave him an out. Reimburse what's been taken, stop using the spaces, and we'll let the court sort out the rest, I said. Calm. Direct. Fair. He didn't even pretend to consider it. Take it to the judge, he said flat. We're not changing anything. And that was it. That was the moment something shifted in my head. Because up until then, I was playing defense, documenting, reacting, waiting. But if there's one thing I've learned in business, it's this. If someone keeps using the same pressure point against you, you don't just block it, you remove it entirely. So instead of calling my lawyer again, I called Tony, the towing guy, Apex Recovery Services. Same gravel voice, same no-nonsense tone. I didn't come in hot, Didn't accuse him of anything. I just asked how business was going. There was a pause, then a chuckle. Man, you don't usually ask a tow operator that unless you're about to complain. I'm not, I said. I'm curious. And once he realized I wasn't there to argue, he opened up a little. Fuel prices were up, insurance was killing him, contracts were inconsistent, some months he barely broke even. Said the only reason he kept going was because he'd been in the game too long to start over. That's when I asked the question, what would it take for you to walk away? Silence again. Longer this time. You serious? Yeah. Now you could almost hear the gears turning on his end. Because guys like Tony, they don't get asked that question often. Not seriously. Not by someone who sounds like they might actually follow through. He threw out a number, half joking at first. I didn't react. Just said, break it down for me. Trucks, equipment, existing contracts, licenses, everything. We met 2 days later. No lawyers, no big conference room. Just a folding table in his office that smelled like coffee and motor oil. He laid it all out. And the more he talked, the more it made sense. Because here's the thing, Apex wasn't a bad business. It was just tired, undercapitalized, 1 or 2 bad months away from folding. And Derek? He was using them like a weapon. So I made an offer. Real one. Clean, fast, no games. 2 weeks later, I owned Apex Recovery Services. $87,000. Trucks, contracts, dispatch line, everything. And I didn't tell Derek. Not yet. First thing I did, I pulled every invoice tied to my property. Every single tow involving my tenants. And I refunded all of it. Quietly. No announcement, no marketing spin, just checks and emails that said, this has been taken care of. You want to rebuild trust? That's how you do it. Second thing, I reviewed all active service agreements, including the one Derek had with Apex. Standard contract, termination clause, nothing fancy. So I exercised it. Sent him a formal notice. Apex would no longer be providing services to his property, effective immediately. No explanation, just business. Third thing, and this one was my favorite. I replaced every single sign in my parking lot. Same size, same placement, same wording, but updated. Clean, sharp, impossible to ignore. Private parking, tenants only. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed by Apex Recovery Services. Call this number. My number now. 3 days later, my phone rings. Derek. And I swear, you could hear the disbelief before he even spoke. You bought the towing company? No hello. No build-up. Straight to it. I leaned back in my chair. Yeah. That's insane, he said. Not angry, just trying to process it. Business is business, I replied. Same line he'd been hiding behind for weeks. Funny how it sounds different when it's not working in your favor. There's a pause. Then he goes, you can't just cut us off like that. I didn't, I said. Your contract allowed termination. You signed it. Another pause. Longer. He was recalculating now. Because suddenly, the pressure point was gone. No more instant towing. No more leveraging a third party to create chaos. No more pretending those spaces were his without consequence. For the first time since this started, he didn't have control of the situation. He tried one more angle. Threatened to report me to some business ethics board. Claimed conflict of interest, unfair practices, all the buzzwords people use when they realize the rules they were bending suddenly apply to them too. Nothing came of it. Of course it didn't. Because everything I did? Clean. Documented. Legal. And then, finally, the court date came. Months of back and forth, filings, delays, all leading to one morning in a room that smelled like old wood and quiet tension. Judge sat up front. No nonsense, sharp eyes, the kind of person who's seen every version of this story before. Marcus laid it out simple. Deed. Plat map. Historical use. Photographic evidence. Timeline of towing incidents. Financial impact. Derek's side tried to lean on that same word again, ambiguity. Claimed the boundary line was unclear, that they acted in good faith based on their survey. But here's the problem with that argument. It only works if the facts support it. And they didn't. Judge flipped through the documents, asked a couple of questions, then leaned back. Survey is clear, he said. There is no ambiguity. Just like that. Those 12 spaces? Mine. Fully, legally, unquestionably mine. But it didn't stop there. He went further, ruled that Derek was liable for every improper tow. All associated costs. Legal fees. Court fees. Total came out just over $13,000. And yeah, it was satisfying. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But honestly, the money wasn't the win. The win was walking back into that parking lot the next day, seeing my tenants pull in without hesitation. No second guessing, no looking over their shoulder, just normal again. Because at the end of all this, that's what Derek never understood. This was never just about parking. It was about control. And the moment he tried to take it, he lost it. So yeah, that's how it ended. Not with some dramatic showdown, not with shouting or slammed doors, just a quiet shift back to normal. Cars pulling in, tenants going about their day, no tow trucks circling like vultures anymore. And honestly, that's the part most people don't talk about. When the dust settles, what you're really left with isn't the victory. It's the system you protected or failed to. Because if you strip the story down to its bones, this wasn't about a towing company, and it definitely wasn't about 12 parking spaces. It was about boundaries, legal ones, yes, but also psychological ones. The invisible line where someone decides, I can take this and nothing's gonna stop me. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People test those lines all the time. Not always aggressively like Derek did. Sometimes it's subtle, a favor that turns into an expectation, a small rule that gets ignored until it doesn't exist anymore. But the mechanism? It's the same. The lesson here is, if you don't define and defend your boundaries early, someone else will redefine them for you. And they won't ask permission when they do it. Now from a practical standpoint, especially if you own property, manage tenants, or deal with shared spaces, this whole situation is a case study in leverage. Not loud, emotional leverage, but structural leverage. The kind that comes from understanding how systems connect. Because think about it, Derek didn't actually own my parking spaces, but he found a way to influence them. He used a third party, a towing company, to enforce his version of reality. And for a while, it worked. Not because he was right, but because he was decisive. That's something a lot of people underestimate. Confidence, especially misplaced confidence, can create temporary authority. Enough to make others hesitate. Enough to make the situation feel unclear, even when it isn't. This is a psychological trap, one that shows up everywhere, not just in business. Someone acts certain, acts fast, and suddenly you're the one second-guessing yourself. Even when you have the documents, the proof, the facts. And if you stay in that hesitation too long, you lose ground. But here's the flip side, and this is where things get interesting. You don't always have to fight force with force. Sometimes the smarter move is to step outside the conflict entirely and ask, what's the actual mechanism here? What's the thing enabling this behavior? For me, it wasn't Derek. It was access. Access to enforcement. Access to a system that allowed him to act without immediate consequences. So instead of arguing with him over and over again, I removed the system. And yeah, I get it. Buying a towing company isn't exactly a standard play. Most people aren't going to go that route. But that's not really the point. The point is this. Every conflict has a structure behind it. A process. A dependency. And if you can identify that, you can change the game without ever raising your voice. From a legal perspective, everything that happened here reinforces something simple but important. Documentation wins. Not opinions, not assumptions, not who sounds more confident on the phone. Documents. Deeds. Recorded boundaries. Because when this finally reached the courtroom, all the noise disappeared. No more tone, no more pressure tactics, just facts. And facts don't care who showed up with more attitude. But I'll tell you what mattered just as much as the legal win: consistency. I didn't let it slide just this once. I didn't ignore the early signs. And I didn't pass the cost on to my tenants while figuring it out. Every time something happened, I responded. Maybe not loudly, but clearly. And over time, that builds something people don't think about enough: credibility. My tenants stayed not just because the issue got resolved, but because they saw how it was handled. They saw that when something crossed the line, it got addressed. Not eventually, not conditionally, but directly. And that's rare. So if you're watching this and thinking, okay, cool story, but what would I actually do in that situation? Start smaller. Pay attention to the first boundary that gets tested. The first time something feels slightly off. That's your moment. Not after it escalates. Not after it becomes expensive. Right there. Clarify. Document. Communicate. And if the other side keeps pushing, don't just react. Analyze. What are they relying on? What system are they using? Where is the leverage really coming from? Because once you see that, the whole situation changes. You're not just defending anymore. You're deciding how the game gets played. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need to buy a towing company to win. But you do need to think like someone who could. So yeah, that's my story. Curious what you think. Was that overkill, or exactly what the situation called for? What would you have done differently if you were in my position?